Hello YouTube, welcome back. This isn't Nutkin Farm, this is Summerland Farm. Stopped in here on my travels in my latest trip because I was curious and I'd never seen the huge operation that Summerland Farm has here near Alstonville in the Northern Rivers of New South Wales. What you're seeing is a great big macadamia processing plant with wonderful technology, great processing capacity. There's a gate here through which all the trucks come to deliver most of the macadamias of the Northern Rivers. And it cornered a large part of the market, largely because of a charitable reason. This place is run by the House with No Steps, and just about everyone here who works here has a disability. And it is an absolute testament to our industry that we managed to support a fully thriving, profitable business processing our macadamia nuts. And by processing, I really mean dehusking and sorting and getting them ready for cracking. I don't think they do cracking. But they've been viable for quite a long time. They've been, constantly investing in newer and better technology, and the reject rates coming out from their sorting have been very low. So the farmers love them, and it's an absolutely a win-win, and it's a triumph for the disability sector as well. Rather than government handouts, these people are earning real income doing real productive work, and I wish we could do that in so many other sectors of life. Summerland Farm's visitable by the public. You can't go in through these gates, particularly not on the weekend, but they do have their own macadamia farm, which you see here. They do avocados, they do other things, and there's a kids petting zoo. There's something really for the whole family, and there's even a restaurant that they operate. So as a tourist destination, it holds its own in the Northern Rivers and well worth visiting. You'll be attended to by people with a disability. They are all just great, friendly people. Very, very glad that you show an interest in their work and in the venture that they're doing. So highly recommended. But I guess it's time to get on with the show. And now from Summerland Farms to the local Woolies here in Lismore. And Lismore, for those of you who don't know it, is really the regional capital of the macadamia growing district in the Northern Rivers of New South Wales. And here we can find macadamias harvested from the Wide Bay and Northern Rivers regions, 400 grams for $15.40. Finally, we see prices coming down. That's effectively $38.50 a kilo, but it hasn't come much down from the $45 a kilo that Woolies were doing just 6 months ago. Now, in an Australian Macadamia Society meeting, one of the questions farmers were asking was, look, why aren't these retail prices tumbling? And the only answer they had for them is that the shops like Woolies and Coles are jealously guarding their retail margins, and so if there's a windfall from prices dropping, they won't necessarily pass it on to the consumer. It's a very amoral approach. You would have thought that if effectively, if you're getting paid, let's assume these are last year's nuts, the end price paid to farmers was around about $2.50 a kilo from Marquee. If you say that nut and shell is a third kernel, and you do the maths, farmers were paid about $7.50 for a kilo of kernel. Assume then that the nut processor gets about, let's give them even more than the farmer. Let's say that they give $10 a kilo of added value. That's about $17.50 a kilo. That's really sort of laying it on thick. At $38 a kilo, Woolies is making a killing, and unfortunately at prices like those, macadamia sales aren't really going to skyrocket to take up the excess supply that is currently on the market. But there's even worse news. So I've just come to another part of the Woolworths store now, and in the macro organic section, which Woolies has, where they sell a large number of organic products, I've come across organic macadamias, certified organic by ACO, Australian Certified Organic. Now, any consumer looking at this packet would probably just assume that these are Australian macadamias as well, but when you look on the rear of the packet, grown in Kenya, packed in Australia, 0% Australian content. Now, I couldn't believe it when I got the tip off from Maddie Kelby. Big shout out to Maddie for finding this. I couldn't believe that in the macadamia capital of Australia, Woolworths is trying to sell to you macadamias that they have brought over from Kenya, the opposite side of the world. And I have Kenyan subscribers. I love you guys. I love what you do. I don't begrudge that you're growing macadamias at all, but you don't find Australian macadamias on your supermarket shelves any more than we'd expect to find Kenyan macadamias on the market shelves of an Australian grocer, particularly here where we grow the macadamia nuts. And I just think it is outrageous of Woolworths to do that. I mean, so much of this area actually earns its income from the macadamia industry, either directly or indirectly. And to be trying to sell these macadamias is just amoral. Now, look at the price. Effectively, $70 a kilo, $17.50 for 250 grams. I actually had a look at what Kenyan macadamia farmers get paid for their nuts, and the most recent data I could find was in 2021, and this is before the price crash, before the big price crash. Anyway, prices were going down, but not that much. The farmers in Kenya were being paid anywhere between 50 and 65 Kenyan shillings for a kilo of macadamias, organic or non-organic. It's nutting shell. Now, a shilling is about 1 Australian cent. So the farmers in Kenya are getting something like, at most, 65 cents a kilo for their macadamias. Right. Now, those macadamias are being brought over here and sold at $70 a kilo, effectively 7,000 shillings if you're watching this in Kenya. That's the level of markup that's being applied to your product being sold into Australia. There's no such thing here as fair trade like you get with coffee or anything else like that. The farmer is getting next to nothing for these macadamias, and they're being sold at a premium here in Australia, very cynically, by a company that is showing absolutely no social conscience for where it is sourcing its products. And this isn't the first time for Woolies. I mean, there were stories years ago that, the Woolies at Rockhampton, the beef capital of Australia, was selling meat that had been trucked up chilled from Victoria, because that's just how Woolies did business to get beef from the cheapest possible source. But to do this with macadamias in macadamia heartland really leaves a bad taste in the mouth. And, I just want to put this out there to make sure people are aware. These are not Australian macadamias. This is the first instance I have seen of any macadamias from foreign origin being sold in Australia since the 80s, when we got them from Hawaii, and there wasn't really much of a local industry then. Okay, they can probably argue that there's a shortage of organic macadamias in Australia. It is very hard to farm them organically in Australia, but to do that, for farmers to be paid such a paltry price and for them to charge such a premium on these macadamias is, I think, reprehensible. What can you do about it? All I can say is, look, don't buy them, number one. Try and alert your friends to the fact that, if you buy macro foods from Woolies, or if you buy sort of any fresh produce from Woolies, always double check, right? People will assume that these are Australian products and that they're buying these and helping Australian farmers. They're not. You're not really helping Kenyan farmers either, because you know what price they're getting. So keep an eye out, guys. don't necessarily assume that what you've got is product of Australia. We're now facing that point where companies like Woolworths, they don't offer macadamias from any private supplier. It's all home brand, so that they're in complete control of the price of macadamia products sold in their store. This is where you need to be suspicious, particularly of these home brands, to see if any market manoeuvres are in play. And sadly, in this case, there are. Meanwhile, back on the farm, there's a bit of good news and a bit of bad news. Here's my contractor's big case international harvester, 115 horsepower tractor. Long-term watchers of the channel will have seen this before. It has a sweeper equipped out the front to sweep out nuts and dead debris from underneath trees. And at the back it's got Bertie the mulcher, a very high-powered hammer mulcher, which the plan at least was to send it down my rows in block 6 and 7 and mulch down both all the long grass but also prepare it for harvest. And when you're starting with long grass, it's often better to start with a mulcher, simply because it will get the grass down and pulverise it into small pieces that are less likely to gunk up a harvester later. If you slash and if you mow, the pieces of grass might be too long and clog up a harvester too easily. But look, at this late stage, I have to thank my contractor, who actually went and looked at the blocks and said, look, really, there's not enough nut here to justify what we're going to have to do to pick it up. If it's not, there just isn't enough crop, and I'm going to end up charging you more than you're going to get back in nuts. And I have to applaud the honesty of a contractor, because he's brought his tractor here and everything, but he's not going to charge me a cent, because he's got a conscience, and he's not just going to provide services that have no reasonable prospect of turning a profit. Really honest approach to that. And so this tractor will go away without doing any of its wonderful work, and I am going to go focus on those blocks in terms of slashing them down, possibly looking at a skirting and definitely some feed, because the trees are calling out for some food as they start setting out the flower for the next season. Not that I'm necessarily after a big crop next season, but the trees still need to be looked after along with the soil. And to finish on a more positive note, here I am in block 1, and the good news is that block 1 will be harvested. Of all the blocks I have, this is my pet block. It's also done the best for the year in terms of cropping. It's got the best soil pH, came back best on the soil test results, and you can see it in the results. There is a good amount of harvestable nut here on the ground. These are big nuts, good quality nuts, well worth picking up. There won't be enough to fill a skip bin, but we're working again with the same contractor in filling a few field bins, putting them in, getting a little bit of money for that crop. It won't be that much revenue positive, but it's something. And look, as Bruce Chester once reminded me, you're making food for people. It's kind of hard to leave all of it on the ground and let it go to waste. It just seems immoral to do something like that when you've got a nut that so many people like. I think, as we go forward, the industry really has to start looking at the supply chains and dealing with end retailers who try and maximise the price without being terribly worried about social conscience and the needs of farmers to sell their crop. But, that'll be an ongoing market thing, and we hope that some competing market forces might come into being. And if I'm lucky to telegraph a future episode of the Macadamia Show, I may be able to introduce you to someone who's doing something about that very problem. In the meantime, what a lovely day. We're going to have a bit more lovely weather here before any rain comes back. The rain in the northern rivers has been less than average so far in 2023, about 100 millimetres less than average, about 600 mils so far for the year. In some places that sounds like a lot. It's not a lot in the northern rivers. Is El Nino coming? I would hazard a guess, yes. So we may be in for a dry season. Most of us are sick of wet seasons, but we might start missing them when it comes to spring this year. All the more important if you've got baby trees to get them firmly rooted down and ready to withstand a bit of dry. All right, that's it for me for now. I'm going to go do a little bit of homework, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.